Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
Cook Inlet Tug and Barge, a marine transportation company specializing in harbor services focusing on the Port of Anchorage and the major commercial participants in the Cook Inlet region, providing customers with marine services specifically tailored to their needs.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening and welcome to Alaska Weather. I'm Sam Albanese from the National Weather Service. And to get started, we'll take a look at our fire danger map to talk about what's going on there. We do have some high fire danger over in the Copper River Basin, as well as portions of the Susitna Valley right on down through the Anchorage area to the western Kenai Peninsula, the Cook Inlet region side of the Kenai Peninsula. Also, some extreme fire danger just along the north slopes of the Alaska Range, which I'd like to point out we do have red flag warnings in effect for tomorrow afternoon and again Thursday afternoon. What's going to be happening is we're going to have a trough of low pressure developing across the interior. That's going to result in some strong southerly winds going across the Alaska Range, and as they sink down on the north side of the Alaska Range, it's going to be a Chinook type of an event, warm air, dry air, and winds gusting or sustained 20 to 30 miles an hour. With that extreme fire danger, there are some red flag warnings out that people need to be aware about. Taking a look now at our satellite imagery to see what's going on to cause all this. Starting off with in the North Pacific, we have our system now south of the Aleutian Islands, or just over the central Aleutian Islands, and that's spinning moisture on up into the eastern Bering Sea, central Bering Sea, showery type conditions, and cloudy, generally cool type conditions there. No real fire weather concerns in that neck of the woods. And then what's going to be happening is we'll see a little bit of a system coming off of this frontal band that's coming off the Kamchatka Peninsula, and that'll start to impact the weather later on in the week. Taking a look now at the GOES satellite over the Gulf of Alaska and the mainland part of Alaska. And we have very cloudy conditions, wet conditions over Kodiak Island and along the North Gulf Coast. And it is cloudy over the eastern interior, and we're going to have this trough building in. Take a look at that loop one more time, and you can see this moisture feeding on up in, but it's also kind of moving off to the east, and this band down here will eventually be moving on up towards southeast Alaska, which will be resulting in the potential for rain as we move on out into the next couple of days. Taking a look at the weather map for today, we have our stationary frontal boundary or trough across the interior. There was cloud cover and isolated to scattered shower activity along that trough boundary. Along the North Gulf Coast, there was some scattered shower activity as well in the Prince William Sound area, cloudy conditions and slightly cooler conditions. And then here's our front, our occluded front that's coming across the Bering Sea, basically from the low pressure system south of the central Aleutian Islands, across the Bering Sea and the Alaska Peninsula into the western Gulf of Alaska. Rain and showers were occurring across Kodiak Island, some showery conditions across the Alaska Peninsula. There was some drizzle and fog in the Pribilof Islands with rain or showers over the central and eastern Aleutian Islands. And out into the western Aleutian Islands and the wraparound flow and that northerly flow, there was also some showery type conditions. Changing our focus up towards the Arctic coast, generally with this ridge of high pressure that was extending in off the Arctic Ocean, that was resulting in some foggy conditions as well as some flurries along pretty much all portions of the north slope throughout the day today. Taking a look now at the forecast for tonight, we have a low pressure system that will be forming, that has formed along that occluded front, and basically the front dissipates into a trough. This is coming up towards Kodiak Island. Expect rain over Kodiak Island throughout the night tonight, spreading over towards the outer coastal areas of the Kenai Peninsula and the southern Cook Inlet region. Basically after midnight is when you should expect the majority of your rain to be falling across those regions. Generally cloudy conditions over the Prince William Sound area and the North Gulf Coast. Southeast Alaska should see clearing conditions, generally clear conditions overnight. A scattered shower or two if possible in the Copper River Basin. Clear conditions in the Susitna Valley with our trough extending across the interior. Cloudy conditions over the eastern interior with some showers up into the upper Yukon Valley, and on the north side of the Brooks Range, some snow showers are possible in the eastern Brooks Range. Cloudy conditions over the eastern Arctic coast, and then over the central and western Arctic coast, a continuation of the fog and flurries can be expected tonight. Cloudier conditions down through the Bering Strait, and then with our system leaving the central Aleutian Islands, moving off to the south and east, we'll still see some rain in the Dutch Harbor area, but generally some scattered to isolated shower activity along the Aleutian Islands. Rain or showers can be expected over the Pribilof Islands with some showers in the western Bering Sea. By Wednesday, we have this low pressure system kind of working on back towards the main parent low pressure system that's coming off the central Aleutian Islands, and it's going to be over towards the Alaska Peninsula with this trough extending into the Gulf of Alaska. Expect rain over Kodiak Island and along the North Gulf Coast into the Prince William Sound area, predominantly the western Prince William Sound area down towards Cordova as well. In the northern portions of the Sound up into the Valdez area, there's a chance of some rain or showers there. Southeast Alaska should be looking at a sunny day for the day tomorrow. Same thing for the Copper River Basin, that eastern interior region. Even though we have this trough extending across the region, what you can expect there is sunny conditions early on in the day, and then as the day progresses, you'll see an increase in your cloud cover, but also more importantly, with that trough and this high pressure ridge pushing in, south winds across the Alaska Range are going to result in those red flag conditions along the north slopes of the Alaska Range. Sunny conditions right across the interior to the Seward Peninsula, cloudy conditions persisting along the Arctic coast, might even see a little bit of fog over the central to western Arctic coastal areas. In the Bering Sea, basically the residual weak northerly flow across the Bering Sea will result in some showery type conditions over the western Alaska Peninsula, eastern Aleutian Islands, and scattered showery conditions over the central to western Aleutian Islands, although in the extreme western Aleutian Islands, probably going to see some sunny conditions throughout the day tomorrow out towards Shemya. Taking a look now at the forecast for Thursday, we have this trough extending all along the North Gulf Coast, well, from the Bristol Bay Low along Kodiak Island, North Gulf Coast to just off the coast of southeast Alaska. Expect rainy conditions to develop late in the day, really more towards Thursday evening, Thursday night in the Sitka area. Rain throughout the day for the Yakutat area. Rain as well can be expected along the Prince William Sound area to the south side of the Kenai Peninsula. Rain turning to showers over Kodiak Island and out across the Alaska Peninsula. Expect numerous showers throughout the day on Thursday. Showery conditions can be expected over the Bering Sea coastal areas. Even in that Bristol Bay area, you're going to have a rain shadow across the Aleutian Mountains, but then as you get towards Dillingham and the Killbuck Mountains, expect more numerous showers there. We'll have this low pressure system over by Norton Sound with a trough extending across the interior. And even though there's going to be cloudy conditions again with that trough extending across there and this ridge of high pressure between the two troughs, windy conditions will be resulting in red flag conditions for the north slopes of the Alaska Range. Showers further north into the the upper Yukon Valley across the western interior. Breaks in the clouds over the upper Yukon Valley as well as the north slopes of the Brooks Range, although cloudy conditions will persist along the Arctic coast itself. In the Bering Sea, generally speaking, cloudy conditions, some breaks in the clouds out over the western Aleutian Islands are what you can expect. Temperatures around the state today in the 50s to low 60s throughout southeast Alaska, 50s and upper 40s over the south central region, 50s and 40s in the eastern interior. As we move on north towards the Arctic coastal regions, in the teens along the Arctic coast, 30s right along the Brooks Range to the mid-40s, mid-30s to mid-40s. Over towards the Kotzebue Sound area, temperatures in the mid-20s and mid-30s. Norton Sound side of the Seward Peninsula in the upper 40s to upper 30s. And then as we move on over towards southwestern Alaska, mid-40s along the Bering Sea coast to mid-50s inland. The Bristol Bay area, low to mid-40s right along the coast and mid-40s inland as well. And then mid to upper 40s along the Alaska Peninsula to the eastern Aleutian Islands, upper 30s to mid-40s in the Pribilof Islands, and mid to low 40s throughout the remainder of the Aleutian Islands. For our low temperatures for tonight in southeast Alaska, temperatures expected in the low to mid 30s throughout much of the area to the right near 40 across some areas. Right along the North Gulf Coast in the South Central region, temperatures generally in the mid 30s to low 40s, 30s and low 30s to mid 30s in the interior. Up along the Arctic coast, single digits to right around 10 to 12 degrees to the low teens. The Seward Peninsula, expect your temperatures in the teens and 20s there. Staying relatively warm over the western interior in the mid 30s to low 40s. Same thing for Bristol Bay in the upper 30s, mid 30s to low 40s across the Alaska Peninsula. 35 in the Pribilof Islands and in the upper 30s to low 40s along the Aleutian Islands. Taking a look at our highs for tomorrow, temperatures nearing 60 in the northern panhandle, generally in the 50s to low 60s in the southern panhandles and in the 50s along the coast. 50s throughout the south central region. 60s can be expected basically from the upper Yukon Valley right on down the Yukon Valley to the lower Yukon Valley. And in the 50s in the Bristol Bay area, 40s along the outer coastal areas of the Yukon-Kuskokwim Delta, and temperatures as we move on up towards the Seward Peninsula in the mid-20s to low 30s, temperatures in the teens to low 20s along the Arctic coast, and expect your temperatures to be in the low to mid-40s in the Aleutian Islands. Flying weather for tomorrow, marginal conditions in Prince William Sound, IFR conditions across Kodiak Island, some marginal conditions in Bristol Bay, marginal to IFR conditions throughout much of the Bering Sea, marginal conditions through the Bering Strait, and some marginal conditions along the Arctic coast. For our passes, expect VFR conditions for Anaktuvik as well as Adigan Pass, marginal to IFR conditions for Lake Clark and Merrill Pass with VFR conditions for Rainy as well as Windy Pass, VFR conditions for Isabel as well as Mentasta Pass, and Taonita Pass, expect VFR conditions, marginal conditions in Portage Pass with VFR conditions for Chilkoot and White Pass. For our freezing levels tomorrow, the freezing level will be at the surface up to the Brooks Range to about 4,000 feet as you get on towards the Gulf of Alaska to 6,000 feet in the southern panhandle, with freezing levels around 2,000 feet out in the western Aleutian Islands. For icing tomorrow, not a lot of icing. Expect some isolated moderate rime icing from the southern portions of Prince William Sound across Kodiak Island as well as across the Alaska Peninsula. Taking a look at our jet stream for tomorrow, comes at about 100 knots off of the Kamchatka Peninsula to 85 knots across the Aleutian Islands, accelerates to 130 knots south of the Alaska Peninsula, 120 knots coming south of the Gulf of Alaska, and then tapers off to about 75 knots as it makes landfall over the panhandle. Moving on down to the 9,000 foot level, generally light winds over much of south central Alaska and the panhandle, light winds over the Alaska Peninsula, 15 to 20 knot winds coming across the Seward Peninsula and the Arctic coastal areas and out into the Bering Sea and the Aleutian Islands. Generally light winds throughout the majority of the Bering Sea as well as the Aleutian Islands, 15 knots or less. Down to 3,000 feet, light winds over southeast Alaska. Stronger winds right along the North Gulf Coast here in Kodiak Island, about 30 to 35 knots. Light winds across the Alaska Peninsula with 20 to 25 knot winds over the eastern Aleutian Islands. Light winds over the Bering Sea as well as the Arctic coastal regions, which takes us to our turbulence chart for tomorrow. Expect some occasional moderate turbulence below 2,000 feet over Kodiak Island, the Aleutian Mountains, as well as the southern portion of the Kenai Peninsula. That wraps up this portion of the show. Enjoy the segment and come back for the marine forecast.
This is the city office. Ice is jammed about 1 mile downriver and the water is starting to come up. We'll be watching it.
Boy, there's a lot more water this morning, and the ice is really moving.
Seems to be getting a pretty dramatic movement now, and like it's going to make its push to go up.
The river, giving, taking, changing. It provides food, serves as a highway of water in the summer, and an ice road in the winter. a transportation system so people can visit and trade between communities. It provides pleasure and nurtures our spirits with its power and beauty. So we build our homes and communities as close as we can to the banks of the river. And this ensures the river a sellout audience for its greatest show of the year when it floods its banks, its most spectacular time of giving and taking. Every year, some community along the river is flooded. Ice and water damages and destroys property, injures and sometimes takes the lives of people and animals who get in its way. Millions of dollars are spent by the state in disaster relief. Roads, utilities, and community buildings damaged or lost to floodwaters. But with better planning and preparation, communities can help prevent serious damage from the flooding. Ice holds the river captive in the winter. With the coming of spring, the warmth of longer days of sun releases the snow. It turns into water, melting into the river, causing the water to rise, pushing and finally breaking the ice, jamming the river. The water backs up behind the jam, overflows the banks, and creates a flood. Sometimes the melt-off is so quick and so much, water alone can overwhelm the river into a flood without the aid of an ice jam. Different combinations of events beyond even the river's control decide whether your place or someone else's is flooded. Not even the river knows. So the best protection is always be prepared. As breakup approaches, government, schools, health facilities, and communities should get together to review flood plans. This allows everyone to be alerted to the flood danger so you can protect property and lives. Stay informed and be vigilant. Flooding is unpredictable until just a few days before it happens. Be aware it can happen any time until breakup is over. Listen to flooding information on radio and television. Be certain the community knows what to do in case of flooding. Keep children and pets away from culverts, potential flooding areas, and floodwaters. Contact an insurance agent or city official about flood insurance if you don't have it. Because of fewer state dollars, communities need to rely more on their own resources. Don't rely on state disaster relief funds to cover your losses. Before breakup, inspect flood-prone areas to make certain your home and property are not in danger. If they are, prepare them for high water or move them to high ground. Make certain important documents or valuables are also protected or moved out of danger. Shut down power plants and remove batteries from generators. Protect septic systems, wells, and fuel tanks. Shut valves to prevent spilling. Anchor fuel tanks or move them to high ground, disconnecting their manifold pipes to prevent breakage and spills when fuel tanks float.
Yeah, the last time we had a flood in '89, this 25,000 gallon tank here moved around 300-400 feet over by the post office and ended up spilling some fuel all over. So what AKwx has done is put these guy wires in, and they're anchored to a 8-foot dead man, and hopefully even in the highest water they won't move.
Be prepared to do without electricity in case floodwaters damage power systems. Keep charged batteries on hand to power portable tools, appliances, telephones, and radios. Anticipate being cut off for some days. Your airport could flood. Your home or you could be cut off from others by floodwaters. So stock up on food, water, and first aid supplies. Make certain you and your family, as well as others in the community, know where the community shelter is. Make certain backup systems work. Test them as part of your flood preparation. And be aware that others in the community may not be able to help themselves. Help them prepare and be there for them in case it does flood.
It happens a couple of times in my past time, you know. Disabled peoples and the old peoples are just unable to save their things that are in low places because other peoples in the village take care of their properties first before they take care of somebody else's property. It's very hard for elders to save their property in the low places.
And people with serious medical problems and expectant mothers should be moved to the city or a nearby village with a flood-proof airport. There's a lot that can be done to limit flood damage if these things are done. However, even more can be done if communities have long-range flood plans. This kind of planning, however, means thinking of communities differently than in the past. It wasn't long ago that Alaska's people were nomadic, traveling to hunting, fishing, and other food gathering sites with the seasons. Dwellings were temporary and portable. They were placed on the edges of rivers and other large bodies of water because it was more convenient to be near food sources like fish and transportation like a river. Dwellings and gear could be moved quickly if there was flood danger. If property was lost, the cost of replacing it wasn't a lot. Today, homes, property, and community structures cost thousands and sometimes millions of dollars. They are built to be permanent, not to be moved. So a lot of thought and planning needs to be done about where to place buildings. Where to put a building has to be balanced between the convenience of having structures and other valuable property close to river industries and subsistence sites, or risking serious damage or total destruction from floodwaters. Today, communities are investing not only money, but pride in their homes and community. Buildings need to last because they are built for many generations. They are just the beginnings of villages growing into important regional centers. They are part of the cultural heritage of today's children, passed on to tomorrow's.
Welcome back, and now let's take a look at our marine forecast for Southeast Alaska for tomorrow, that is Wednesday. In the inside waters, south winds up in the Lynn Canal and Glacier Bay to about 15 knots there. Variable to 10 knots in the middle inside waters with winds out of the west-northwest, 15 knots in the southern inside waters. In the southern outside waters, west winds 15 knots, southeast winds 10 knots just off the coast of Sitka with winds southeast 20 knots off the coast of Yakutat. Taking a look at the forecast for Thursday, winds remaining south 15 knots up through that Lynn Canal Glacier Bay area, variable to 10 knots in the middle inside waters, and winds basically light and variable in the southern inside waters to around 10 knots. And this is these winds, the southeast winds in the outer waters here, they're going to be coming up late in the day on Thursday, more towards Thursday night. The majority of the day, generally light winds, but as you get into the evening and nighttime hours, southeast winds 20 to 25 knots along the entire stretch of the outer coastal waters of southeast Alaska to the east Gulf Coast. Taking a look now at the forecast for the south central region on Wednesday, light and variable winds in Prince William Sound. Along the coast itself, about 25 to 35 knot winds from the North Gulf Coast over to the Barren Islands. Kodiak Island waters expect about 25 to 30 knot winds there. 35 knot winds in the Augustine area, with winds increasing to 20 to 25 knots out of the northeast down Cook Inlet. Taking a look at the forecast for Thursday, winds in Prince William Sound will be picking up to 20 knots, 30 knot winds just outside of Prince William Sound out of the east. East to southeast winds 20 knots from just off the coast of Seward to the Barren Islands. Kodiak Island waters about 20 to 25 knot winds out of the east there. East winds 20 knots in the Augustine area with northeast winds 15 to 20 knots down Cook Inlet. Taking a look now at the Alaska Peninsula for Wednesday. Expect your winds to be light and variable over the western Alaska Peninsula. Northeast winds 15 knots out of the Bristol Bay area with north to northwest winds 15 knots south of the eastern Alaska Peninsula. By Thursday, we'll see the winds over the western Alaska Peninsula becoming northwest to west about 20 to 25 knots. Over towards the south of the eastern Alaska Peninsula, generally the western half of that, you're still going to see those westerly winds about 20 to 25 knots. The northeast winds are going to be closer towards the Shelikof Strait area, coming out of Shelikof Strait at 20 knots. East winds 10 knots in the Bristol Bay area, somewhat variable. Taking a look now at the Aleutian Islands for Wednesday, expect your winds to be northeast, 15 knots from the eastern Aleutian Islands out towards the Adak area. North winds 20 knots over the Amchitka area to north winds 15 knots over the western Aleutian Islands out towards Shemya. Taking a look at the area for Thursday, winds are going to become northwesterly, about 20 to 25 knots over the eastern Aleutian Islands, the Dutch Harbor, Unalaska area. Northwest winds 15 knots just west of Nikolsky. West winds 15 knots in the Adak to Atka area, with north winds 15 knots over the Amchitka area, and light and variable winds at 10 knots over the western Aleutian Islands. For our Bering Sea coastal waters on Wednesday, expect your winds to be northwest 15 knots in the Pribilof Islands, with northeast winds over the remainder of the area, 10 knots along the Nunivak Island waters to 20 knots up into the St. Lawrence Island region, and 15 knots in the St. Matthew Island region. On Thursday, winds are going to be north-northwest, 15 knots from St. Lawrence Island down to the north side of Nunivak Island and St. Matthew Island. North winds 10 knots just outside of Kuskokwim Bay, and northwest winds 15 knots in the Pribilof Islands. For the Arctic coastal waters on Wednesday, expect your winds to be out of the north-northeast, 15 knots outside of Kotzebue Sound towards Cape Lisburn, with east winds over the remainder of the area, 10 to 15 knots from Barrow to the west, and to 20 knots east of Barrow to the towards Kaktovik. For Thursday, winds will remain east, about 20 to 25 knots though from Kaktovik over towards Prudhoe Bay, and 20 knots just off of Barrow. East winds 15 knots over towards Point Lay, with light and variable winds from Cape Lisburn down to just outside of Kotzebue Sound at about 10 knots. For a quick recap, tonight we are seeing this ridge of high pressure building in, with the trough developing across the interior, rainy conditions over Kodiak Island as well as out towards Dutch Harbor. But more importantly, as we move on out towards Wednesday, with this trough developing in the interior, the ridge building up along the North Gulf Coast, south winds across the Alaska Range are going to result in red flag conditions on the north slopes of the Alaska Range for tomorrow afternoon and evening. We're out of time for the show this evening. Thank you for watching and have a good evening.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.